By now, you've heard me share a story or two about my first car. An AMC Eagle hatchback with a proclivity for ditches, guardrails, and snowbanks. The truth is that oil-guzzling beauty deserves better than the elegy I've given it. First off, I only paid $200 for it in the first place. I purchased it with a wad of cash handed over to its previous owner, my friend, Jeff McInich, otherwise known as Mac Attack, the 160-pounder on my high school wrestling team. Now, Mac Attack. Mac Attack. I love that guy. My favorite Mac Attack story was how, in our junior year of high school, I scored 24 points by myself in the state wrestling tournament, but our team ended up with only 22. How is that, you ask? Well, that happens when nobody else wins a match, and when Mac Attack costs us 2 team points because he pinned himself, yes, that's possible, and then got up and threw his headgear across the gym, which in wrestling is a pretty automatic 2-point deduction from the team score for unsportsmanlike conduct. He was happy to sell me that car, though. Even at that price, he was so happy to hand those keys over, and I was so happy to take them. I wasted no time in making a road trip with it. I filled the tank with gas and spun off down the highway with a group of friends ready to take on the world. A few hours later, in the middle of Massachusetts, a long way from home and in the pouring rain, the car stalled. I worked the key and it sputtered on for another minute and it stalled again. I steered the car as we coasted off a convenient exit and beneath an overpass. "We're out of gas," one of my friends said. But the gauge said we still had a quarter of a tank. I tapped it. It still said we had a quarter of a tank. But come to think of it, it had read a quarter of a tank for a really long time. Obviously, the old gas gauge was broken. Thanks, Mac Attack. You could have told me. The church has gone through a similar challenge in 2020. The old gauges were broken. I would argue, and have been arguing in this State of the Kirk address for the past 4 years, that the traditional gauges, the ones we've used to determine our fuel level, have actually been broken for a very long time. But in 2020, officially, gone was in-person worship attendance as a barometer of our health. Gone was our income from passing the plate as a determinant of our fuel level. Even the beauty of the sanctuary and the health of the building and grounds were largely taken off the board as indicators of success. Though Erica Ginter, Nate Bauer, Beth Kerr, Marsha Rogers, and so many others gave them diligent attention. But these are the metrics that have defined the well-being of the church for a long time. Far too long in my mind. And this year, they were gone. The gauges were broken, and we were miles and miles from home. But we never stalled out. The gas never ran dry. We were coming off a year in 2019, a year where we truly set hold of our vision statement. We envision a world where every heart experiences God's transforming love. We envisioned a world by rededicating to relational mission opportunities. Our November Service Challenge continued to grow. We partnered with 6 churches to extend from over 6,000 hours of service in November of 2018 to over 7,000 in 2019. We offered experiences for the heart in worship. Our 2019 Easter attendance was the highest in 20 years. Good Friday had the 3rd most people on record, kept since 1985. And we only had one other Maundy Thursday attended by as many people as we had in 2019, and that was in 1988. God's transforming love was evident in our formation programs. We boasted over 200 people in small groups and a record-breaking registration for our October Kai's lecture. And so, as we began 2020, we had all kinds of similar plans for mission, worship, and formation. In January, we sent off our first pilgrimage to South Africa, trusting that the Holy Spirit would be up to something in that voyage. And true to form, God connected us with Mama Bono at Seiki Women's Foundation and Satara Morgan, who teaches at a small school in the rural area. And our pilgrims returned home with energy and imagination for what might be in store for us in joining God's work there. It certainly felt like the tank was full. We were fueled up. And then the challenges came. The biggest challenge, of course, was with the onset of the coronavirus. On March 13th, we closed the building and we assembled a COVID response team. I'm so grateful to Bob Beck, our clerk of session, Nate Conway, our chair of personnel, and Nancy Lau for meeting just about every week since then. Through to June, we were almost entirely online, pre-recording worship even from our homes, and postponing funerals and weddings until some unknown time. And over the summer, we tired. We had staff turnover, some anticipated, some unanticipated, and we shared in all of the feedback, upset, and anxiety that comes with that. We couldn't plan for all of the great traditions of fall for our church. The pandemic wasn't ready. So no picnic, no football game, no in-person Kai's lecture, and on and on. This would wear any organization down. It wore us down. It wore me down. You have no idea how many articles were being written about clergy burnout and clergy migration in late summer. And I resonated with them. I found myself sputtering for one of the first times in my professional life. Sputtering. Feeling like that AMC Eagle on 995. Almost out. Maybe you have had moments like that this year too. But I found myself so buoyed by the love and intention of this congregation, by all of you. And with the privilege of hindsight, I can see now that the traditional gauges might have been broken. But the Kirk had more fuel than we knew. And it was evident from the start. In mid-March, right after everything shut down, the building, the schools, everyone was told to stay at home. I said, what if, to my assistant Jen, I said, what if we had a drive-in carillon concert? I think that's an awesome idea, she said. I think we could pull it together by next weekend, I told her. Why not go for this weekend, she urged. And we did. And Dennis, Our Carol Lenore was fully game to climb the tower and warm the hearts of those that drove in that weekend. And they did. They came. So we decided to do it again the following weekend. And the turnout was overwhelming. Hundreds of cars pulled into the Kirk, and they lined the road all along Long Lake. And they heard from our carillon the sound of hope. And every time Dennis finished a tune, they blared their horns in appreciation. The old gauge wasn't working, but the tank wasn't dry. Then, right out of that gate, our staff designed online programming that gave connection to people when they needed it most. As children reeled from having all of their routines upended, school, sports, playdates, all gone, our staff, led by Kesseline Santiago, designed daily move and play and bedtime stories programs that collected the children over Zoom and brought them into interaction with members of our church. Our formation department also arranged for local principals, social workers, and counselors to join parents over Zoom to discuss parenting in the pandemic. People from throughout the community joined those calls. The old gauge wasn't working, but the tank wasn't dry. It wasn't just the kids from the Kirk that needed attention. Our long-standing relationships with the children in Pontiac pulled us into their stories. Julie Walker and Linda Jurassic Lipa spearheaded internet scholarships, meals, new clothes, and school supplies for Kirk tutor families. Tina Rowan and Accent Pontiac served as veritable case managers for 40 AP families, delivering groceries, hot meals, and essential household items on a weekly basis. When they were able, they offered music lessons on front porches and patios, just to give the students some connection to their passion. And it didn't stop in Pontiac either. In May, we rallied $3,000 of support from members of our congregation to send to Seki Women's Foundation in Port Elizabeth, South Africa. The COVID-19 crisis had them feeding as many as 500 children per day and providing groceries for 140 families. The old gauge wasn't working, but the tank wasn't dry. This outward-facing response to the greatest challenge of our lifetimes was congruent to the first few words of our vision statement. We envision a world, not just a church, a world. Jesus had an expansive vision for his message, not one confined to his most immediate followers. And we are blessed to be a blessing. And so on we went throughout the course of the year. We raised almost $40,000 for the COVID Relief Fund and gave generously to support first responders, back to school efforts, and Presbyterian villages of Michigan. We even joined forces with Pontiac Community Foundation to offer 10 $1,000 gifts to small businesses in Pontiac suffering from the pandemic. We raised thousands of dollars to relieve medical debt in the city of Pontiac. Our initial goal was to eliminate $2.8 million in debt. I am pleased to report that with the help of RIP Medical Debt that purchases the debt, we were able to eliminate, instead of $2.8 million, almost $5.5 million of debt for over 5,000 families in Pontiac and in Oakland County at an average of $1,070 each. Oh, and by the way, we out-fundraised our goal by so much that we have money left over to do more again next year. And then in September, under the leadership of Bobby Tallinger, Bob Hewer, Sherry Falve, and Ann Manning, we participated in a modified version of the crop walk. Usually, the fundraising and recruitment for this effort to end world hunger relies on a heavy push during our back to church season. But even at a distance, The Kirk won the coveted shoe trophy as the most generous participating church in the area, with a record-setting $18,495 in donations. The Adopt a Family Christmas program followed suit. The Kirk always responds when the deacons make their annual appeal to help families in need. In 2016, the church gave $21,590. In 2017, $22,805. In 2018, $24,198. In 2019, we dipped down to about $18,000. But this year, in a year when we couldn't worship in the same space, we didn't follow that trend. In a year when we haven't seen each other much since last March, this church contributed $29,105 to Adopt a Family. And oh, by the way, our toy collection for Angel Tree, it took a last-minute push, but we collected almost 900 toys for Care House and Micah 6 in Pontiac, up from 700 last year. The old gauge wasn't working, but the tank wasn't dry. Even with all of this outpouring of financial support, I am probably most proud of our annual service challenge. This initiative, birthed by our beloved Pastor Fernando, who we wish so well in his new role in Denver, was handled so ably by Julie Walker. She continued in our tradition of catalyzing churches in the effort, going from 6 churches last year to partnering with 9 churches this year. They held a successful Green Bucket 5K run with Accent Pontiac, offered a catalog of COVID-safe outreach events, and designed some stay-at-home offerings too. The goal was modified. Since we served 7,000 hours last year, and this year we would be hampered by staying at home and social distancing, we set the bar at 5,000 hours. Did we get 5,000 hours? No. Did we get 6,000 hours? No. Did we match last year at 7,000 hours? No. Together we smashed through 8,000 hours with a total of 8,423 hours of service in the month of November. The old gauge wasn't working, but the tank wasn't dry. Soon we will hear more about the next mission pastor to come to the Kirk. He will have big shoes to fill, many excited members to engage, and great programs to shepherd. He will join the Kirk in a year when we have been awarded a $170,000 grant from the Douglas Allison Foundation to partner with Accent Pontiac and Hope Against Trafficking in engaging our membership to be the hands and feet of Jesus in our community. Which shouldn't be new, because we never stopped serving this year. And we never stopped worshiping either. We envision a world where every heart experiences, where every heart has an intimate encounter with the risen Jesus through the act of worship. Now this year, worship was experienced and delivered predominantly through the internet. Our music program continued with those in-person drive-in carillon concerts on a weekly basis. The Classic Car, Halloween, and Carols on the Carillon events were fantastic and creative. The devotional and quiet Vesper services that Glenn Miller put together gave stillness to our souls in the midst of great disruption. And again, under Glenn's leadership, the musicians diligently prepared pre-recorded choral and solo music for worship and musical moments, involving not only the chancel choir staff singers, but also for special occasions involving the girls and boys choirs. These were imaginatively produced by Nicole and Quentin Joseph and Alex Westfall. If you haven't seen what they put together for our Mother's Day service, you really are missing something special. The old gauge wasn't working, but the tank wasn't dry. Those online services with the music, preaching, readings, and prayer have been a lifeline for so many people in this time. Beyond the worship participants, I applaud Alex Westfall, Nancy Scully, Jen Morris, and Kristen Sauer for the effort that they exert every week to put this service on the website, Facebook, and the radio. While I cannot wait until we have the chance to meet again regularly in person, the work we have done to establish this online platform did not happen overnight. Dedicated former employees Jane Zellers and Catherine Kenham, alongside the leadership of the Communications Committee, paved the way for us to have amazing high-definition cameras in the sanctuary, a robust live stream platform, and this year, Nancy Scully designed and created a brand new website for kirkinthehills.org. And from all of this, our reach has been exponential. In the first few Sundays of the pandemic, we celebrated Palm Sunday and Easter. There was no procession of the palms and no Easter egg dash on the front lawn. But between Facebook and the website, 842 people worshiped with us on Palm Sunday, and a whopping 1,700 people from all over the country and all over the world worshiped with us on Easter morning, which matched and exceeded the in-person attendances we had in 2019. The total number of all-time views for Easter was 2,779. The old gauge wasn't working, but the tank wasn't dry. Even as we did our best to accommodate in-person services, using our garden service to our full advantage in the summer and deep into the fall, and establishing a slick registration system to open up the sanctuary whenever we could, we saw a strong community of worshipers gathered together online week in and week out. This was happening all year long. We had a total of 14,332 unique viewers this year in 22 countries. In December alone, we had 3,878 people visit our website. And our email list grew by 154 people this year. Christmas Eve is another good example. The last 2 years, we were very busy on Christmas Eve, overflowing the sanctuary for several of our services. This year, we were only able to accommodate about 700 people for worship services that took place over the course of the day, outside and in the sanctuary. But our online services added another 1,200 unique devices, and that doesn't include the radio broadcast, which was new this year. And that doesn't include the 3 times that Bloomfield Cable Television carried us, which was new this year. And that doesn't include those that worshiped with us through the television system at Cedarbrook Senior Living Center, which was new this year. And that doesn't include those that worshiped with us through the television system at Kirk West Fox Run Senior Living Center that broadcast it to all of its residents on channel 952. Again, new this year. The old gauge wasn't working, but the tank wasn't dry. And can we just talk about Kirk West, the Kirk community that lives at Fox Run Senior Living? Every week, our worship service and a Saturday morning musical moment is produced by our staff and broadcast over their television network to all of Fox Run. There, a dedicated group of volunteers led by Pastor Marjorie and Joan Handpeter tend to 120 residents who associate with the ministry. This year, they conducted 4 food drives and delivered food valued at over $5,000. They participated in the November Service Challenge by making 20 fleece blankets, 2 memory boxes, and gave 370 hours of service. Finally, for Christmas Eve, they distributed 120 bells, cards, and worship bulletins. That initiative is just part of our larger vision to decentralize what it means to be Kirk in the Hills. With the dispersion that came with the pandemic, that happened a little more quickly than any of us would have liked this year. We were all forcibly decentralized. But we are consensually and intentionally decentralizing too. Our vision for a world where every heart experiences God has led us to offer worship not only to Fox Run, but now to Cedarbrook Senior Living Center, and hopefully to more in the future. Our parish council, where Don Guthrie offers us tremendous leadership, is another example of this. By sharing in ministry with Star Presbyterian, First Presbyterian in Troy, and Northminster Presbyterian, where former Kirk resident Chris Hallam is now pastor, we are modeling what the church of the future looks like. The days of one church, one pastor are quickly coming to an end, and the energy of the Kirk can be a resource and inspiration for churches in need. And the resilience of these smaller churches can offer something to us. This year, the council worked together to participate in the service challenge, design a shared minister model, and this summer, they mobilized over 150 to 200 people from the 4 churches to contribute to buying socks and underwear for foster children in crisis. In line with the connectivity with other churches brought on by the parish council, this year the Kirk session entered into an agreement for our synod, the Synod of the Covenant, to locate their home office in the 3rd floor Abbey. I am so looking forward to growing this relationship with the Synod and Dr. Chip Hardwick, the Synod executive, and connecting the Kirk to uplifting ministry in churches throughout the Midwest. Finally, the Kirk Fam, our From Home affiliate membership program. It's the ultimate example of decentralizing. We designed and implemented this program for formal affiliation with the Kirk in June, knowing that people were joining us for worship online from great distances and likely wanted to be part of the family. Well, 30 people have taken us up on that offer so far, and with the addition of 47 new members and 6 members reinstating their membership, we added 83 to the rolls this year. This is absolutely amazing in any year, but especially in a year when we could barely be in the same building. The old gauge wasn't working, but the tank wasn't dry. And being part of this family really is something. Yes, for the opportunity to serve together. Yes, for the opportunity to worship together. But also for the chance to learn and grow in the faith together. We envision a world where every heart experiences God's transforming love. And this year we have been made especially grateful for Pastor Angela's dedication to this endeavor. She created an online formation universe where we connected with one another and the scriptures over Zoom with offerings almost every day of the week. She organized and created video and written devotionals for Lent, for this fall during the Made Well series, and for during Advent. And if anyone ever doubted the importance of small group and Bible study ministry, know that it was a lifeline for many this year. And it wasn't only with one another. We journeyed all over the world, from Asia to Israel to Africa, to learn about the faith and make new friends with Christians going through all of this with us. We also had a summer writers conference featuring best-selling authors that boasted 60 participants from 5 different churches. And then she picked up where Kesseline left off with children's ministry. Beyond organizing weekly Zoom Sunday school, she drew our children and families together for back to school and Thanksgiving prayers and created an outdoor Christmas Eve service for the children with a live nativity. And speaking of children, Pastor Angela was also part of the search team to find Sandy Jewell, our new director for the Kirk in the Hills preschool. She, Robin Brinks, and the whole preschool board offered such commendable leadership in the transition that followed Pauline Jackson's long term in that role. In her first season with us, Sandy calmly and ably led her staff through the protocols to be open for children and families throughout the fall without a single case of COVID in the school. I am particularly proud and grateful since my little Lucy was able to be in school. The well-being of faith formation in children and youth is always going to be a high priority for us here at the Kirk, which is why we were so focused on finding an excellent youth pastor this year. And we did. And it was such a joy to experience an ordination and installation in November. Pastor Kelsey and her husband Mike joined us this summer as a result of a national search led by Anita Pinson and her nominating committee. Upon arrival, Kelsey immediately went to work building relationships with the youth, even with the limitations of the pandemic. And she created the Kirk Campfire, which is located off of the refectory near the lake, where youth met regularly for study and fellowship. She led a COVID-safe retreat where youth and leaders imagined a new program called the Oasis, which will provide programming and space for youth as they counter their stress with the practices of faith. And she is currently working on plans for a summer mission trip in 2021, launching confirmation class next fall, and partnering with Princeton Theological Seminary, the finest theological seminary in the land, on a program that will make the Kirk an area hub for designing and implementing new models for youth ministry in all kinds of churches. But let's face it, her greatest accomplishment so far was working with Cole Pachucky, one of our new administrators, to pull off one of the finest virtual Christmas pageants you will ever see. The old gauge wasn't working, but the tank wasn't dry. So much of this is made possible through your energy and financial generosity. Our excellent business office, reshaped this year with Karen Bowman, a CPA, as our Director of Finance, Susie Artsberger, the President of our trustees, and Jane Dodge, our Treasurer, all at the helm. They shepherded all of the giving and spending this year. And even amidst all of the financial uncertainty that came with 2020, you all contributed 96% of your pledged giving. And we only drew 4.25% from the Kirk's endowments, down from 4.75% the previous year. We are fortunate. Because of this generosity and the strong decision-making of the Kirk's leadership, we end 2020 with a healthy surplus. That said, going into 2021, we are still hoping to see some pledges come in so that we can go about our ministry with confidence throughout this year and into 2022. If you haven't already, please pledge when possible. We are doing awesome things, and we are confident in the generosity of this congregation. So confident, in fact, that the session has green-lighted a feasibility study to engage in a fundraising campaign to celebrate our 75th anniversary in 2022. The strategy team, along with leaders from session, trustees, and outreach and mission, are developing a menu of ideas to share with all of you, to vet with all of you, to collaborate on with all of you in the coming months. Might we set a physical footprint for our mission in Pontiac? How can we further beautify and utilize our campus? Could we gift the next generation of Kirk members the financial footing that the previous generation of Kirk members offered for us? I hope you will be ready to listen and be inspired for how God is working in our midst and how God might be inviting you to join in making the Kirk healthy and strong for the next quarter century. Because while it might be that the old gauges won't be working, the tank isn't dry. We have endured a year of trial, all of us. Here at the church, we are mindful especially of those we lost this year, of those who said goodbye to loved ones with small family gatherings instead of the celebration of life services that they'd hoped for. We're mindful of brides and grooms who struggled through multiple changes to their wedding plans but managed to make the most of it. We're mindful of babies baptized privately instead of amongst the congregation to welcome them in, and for those that were ill or infirm that couldn't get a visit, but we're grateful for a call from Pastor Marjorie or Pastor Keith. And I'm so proud of how we've been as a community, how we have gotten so far through it. We have challenges that sit just ahead of us. Along with so many institutions, we have to decide when to fully reopen. How do we do that? What things will need to be changed? How you all will react to that? And if I'm perfectly honest, we have to hope that all of you are still out there and love this place as much, if not more, than this time last year. But I truly believe that we got stronger this year. Mark my words, we got stronger. There are all kinds of ways to face adversity. You can face it like Macatak did that day at the state meet. To be incredulous, stomp around, to throw your headgear. Or you can be something else. You can be what Macatak, my friend Jeff, is today. He's a family man. He coaches young wrestlers himself, teaching them technique, but also about honor and respect. And how no matter what happens, when the challenge comes, you don't become something small. Instead, you stand tall as as the tower, just as we did this year, even when we couldn't stand together. The old gauges, the ones we used to use, might not be able to tell us much about who we are today and how tall we are standing. And they are unlikely to determine how strong we are tomorrow. But even if the gauges are tiring, if 2020 is any indicator, we can rest assured that the fuel of the Holy Spirit is wide awake and the tank isn't dry. Stay warm, everybody.
So many joys.